Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Art of Light and Shading. If you have a Q&A, please head over to the Discord for Furality. They will have a new channel set up just for Q&A. I will go over the Q&A at the end of the presentation. Is it time? Can we go ahead and begin? Okay, I guess we can go ahead and begin. So welcome to the Art of Light and Shading, a presentation by me, Sotalo. Light is not so much something that reveals, as it itself is the revelation. This is a quote by James Turrell. He's an American artist, a Bachelor of Arts in Perceptual Psychology and a Master of Arts, as well as a National Medal of Arts recipient. He did receive a medal from the president. When someone receives a medal from the president and talks about light, you definitely listen. Unfortunately, I am not him. My name is Sotalo. You might know me as the guy who made the Virtual Furry Museum. But just a little bit more background on me. I studied game art and design at Ringling College of Art and Design through 2011 and 2013. I created the games 2115 and the Manatee Quiz game at Moat Marine Laboratories and Aquarium. I also created the perfect tile system in Unreal Engine 4. I made the Virtual Furry Museum in Unity and VRChat, and I also sell prints. So I've done a few things that you may have, if you're in VRChat, you might have known some of those things. But yeah, I also take photography. Here's just a few examples of some of the pictures I've taken, and some of my traditional art. I think the reason that I'm showing some of these things, a lot of people had the misconception this was going to be strictly about 3D, and right off the bat, I want to say this is a little bit more of a general talk about light and shading for art, which is going to apply to everyone. So, a brief overview of the presentation. You're going to learn about the basic properties of light and color. You're going to build an understanding and gain an appreciation for light, and you're going to learn how to light with purpose. This is not the presentation for, set up a light in bakery and then use these settings. It's more about what makes lighting good, what makes lighting work for you. How do you use it to accomplish a result that you want? So we only have 45 minutes, so I said save questions for the end. Once again, go into the Furality Discord channel. There's an entire channel set up just for this presentation. Put your Q&A in there, and Lawrence or Larry Lou, one of the wonderful Furality staff members, will tell me. So without further ado, let's get started to Chapter 1, the fundamental properties of light and color. We're going to go over just some basic fundamental properties, a little bit on physically based rendering, and we're going to proceed from there. So up here is how I think about light and color. It's not so much like it's kind of like a color palette, like a color wheel, but it's a little bit more robust. You have going around the circle hue, and then going up and down just the brightness, the value, and then going in and out to saturation. A lot of times I see people not really think about color in this way. They kind of just pick colors disjointed all over the place. But it's really important to have a color model like this to look at in order to frame some of the things we're going to talk about later. So here's a breakdown of light and shading. I just kind of have a wonderful sphere from Blender. It took a bit of college experience in order to model that and light that, and lit by one light source. Breaking it down, which I hope you guys can see the little arrows up there, at the very so the light is clearly in a certain direction and it's hitting the model, the brightest point that we're seeing is a specular highlight. And then coming out from the point where the light's hitting, you have just this diffuse going straight from light to dark or to the core shadow. And then after you get past the core shadow, you have the form shadow, which still has a form to it, even though it's being completely shadowed by the light. And then onto other objects, you have a cast shadow. Something that's really important to note if you're doing this in art and you don't have a 3D modeling program, that specular highlight is not going to be the center of the diffuse. It's actually going to be a little bit further down. It's the reflection off of the surface, not just you have a light here and then whatever's closer to the light is that brightness. This gets more complicated, guys, but I only have 45 minutes. So I'm just going to go through really quickly and kind of help you understand why some of these concepts are very important. Now, I didn't change the color of the light here. I just changed the color of the room. All of what you're seeing in the sphere now between the last slide and this one is the color of the room changing. We see the color of the shadows changing. We see the color of the bounce light, the GI changing, and the reflections going into the object are also changing to that color. Now I removed the GI completely. You can see without having any global illumination, all shadows just go straight to black. They go to a dark hole. So if you want proper lighting in any situation, you can't just shade everything straight to black. This creates quite a few issues. You can't really tell any form in areas that are completely shadowed. You can't tell the form of areas within cast shadows. So you need to have something there. And this is where some of the more advanced elements of lighting and rendering really come into play. There's kind of a rim light through the reflections on the outer edge of an object. In any situation that you're in, the reflection is going to be more apparent on the edge than it would be straight in the center. You're going to have ambient occlusion in areas that are really kind of hard for the light to reach. So imagine if a light was just exploding a bunch of rubber bouncy balls. And then it'll bounce all over the room. That's kind of how photons work. But then there's going to be certain areas that the balls are very easy to get to, like, you know, the wall facing the light. And then there's going to be areas that it's harder to get to, like the little nook and cranny crevice underneath an object. Not a lot will be bouncing there. Those areas are going to be your darker areas for ambient occlusion. So moving on to a little bit more about physically based rendering. This is, again, foundation. For some of you might know this, but some of you might not. The physically based rendering system was kind of developed by Brent Burley for Disney. They implemented it for their Hyperion rendering system for Wreck-It Ralph. And that groundbreaking talk became the basis of many, many, many rendering systems that we use nowadays. Before then, you just kind of had specularity, and then light hits an object, and you kind of control how strong that specular is and how powerful. But you have weird situations where light hits an object, and suddenly it's beaming light out like nonsense. The entire purpose of physically based rendering is we're going to say, okay, let's actually make the lighting, shading, rendering work and behave the way light does in the real world. When you make an object less smooth, when it becomes rougher, when it becomes more diffuse, the light kind of mellows out. When it becomes stronger, it's the same amount of light, but it's just getting concentrated into smaller areas. So it's the same amount of energy being used to light all the objects in the scene. It's just controlling the glossiness of that reflection. And then another property, which is kind of interesting with physically based rendering, is metallic, which I guess a lot of people don't really understand what it means. Basically, you're going to take the reflection of the light and multiply it by the color. So a gold ring would look gold under pretty much any light that you shine on it because it is very metallic. And the reflection in that gold ring is going to be, well, the same color as the gold, like kind of a very strong golden yellow. Now compare that to a plastic yellow object. The plastic yellow object, the reflection will show the color, other colors in it. It's going to be less. How do I say this? The colors are going to more be attuned with the environment rather than the color of the object itself. And this is why it's so important, by the way, guys, to set up reflection probes in your worlds. It can harmonize and bring all the lighting, all the colors that you have in the world closer together. And it looks really, really cool. Okay, this is an interesting one. So lights are actually very bright, extremely bright. Even your nightlight is going to be extremely bright. So imagine for a moment you are a small little tiny ant or a fly or a gnat or something that just gets very attracted to light, you know? You can see in the left image, the light on the wall is not that strong, but the light from the lamp itself is extremely bright. Imagine you are that gnat sitting on top of that like burning tungsten of an incandescent bulb, or I guess whatever an LED is. That's going to be extremely bright. And then spreading out from that, the light is going to be much darker, much quicker. And that's expressed here. The inverse square light law. So up at the top, we have a linear gradient. That is not how light looks like in the real world. That is just a gradient going from white to black. And beneath it, we have that same gradient, but to the power of 8, which would make it extremely dark, extremely fast. And most of the, like, once you get passed out a little bit in the distance, it almost completely goes to black and you can't see it. Now, in the real world, light is the intensity equals 1 divided by distance squared. So as your distance doubles, the intensity of the light falls by 3/4. It's extremely intense at the source of the light, and then it leaves a very long trail that falls out, and it never hits 0. If you had a tiny little candle several miles away, you'll still be able to see the light just by looking directly at the candle. Very, very important concept to keep in mind as you light your scenes. If you have a light source in it, those emissive light sources are probably going to be very extremely bright. And then there's going to be a fall off from that. This is a very easy thing to do and manipulate in a shader if you're doing custom lighting in order to give this appearance. So here's just an image comparing the different kinds of lighting setups if you're going to use a Unity for lighting. The inverse square fall off is natural and it's very long and it doesn't ever get cut out. There's certain things in games where you want the light to kind of fall off at a certain distance, and you can use that to control light for all sorts of different things. And what you might want to avoid is a linear light, because that's just flooding the area with light in a very unrealistic and unbelievable way. You would only use that for maybe a soft fill light or something. You wouldn't use that for an actual light, like a lamp sitting in the scene. And this is, again, if you want to be realistic about it, if you want to be genuine. Okay, here is the first problem that I see. This is one of the biggest problems that I see. Black hole, white hole. So it's either so dark I can't see it, it's too bright, it's too painful. Here's an example from a game. Someone on Reddit said the game's too dark to see anything or to make progress. Any help? Sorry, I can't help you there. Yeah, it's just black. I can't see anything. I can't see where to go. That's not fun. Light doesn't behave like that. There would at least be some sort of light somewhere in the scene showing me where to go, seeing some sort of form. I can't make anything out here. And if you think this is just a video game problem, does Game of Thrones have an Ozark problem? Season 8 is so dark it's hard to see. an actual article by Zach Sharf. Yeah, a lot of television productions, and movies get this wrong too. They want to make something dark, they want to make something moody, and they just end up cutting out all the light, and you can't see anything. Like, guys, there's other ways to be dark and moody without completely eliminating all your light. And anyone who has joined the lobby of Furality can probably attest. Brights are too bright, darks are too dark. Can anyone help? Am I crazy? A lot of times people will they'll try to make the sun literally the brightness of the sun, and then they will not have enough bounce lighting in the shadows. And what ends up happening is you have extremely overly bright areas that are just blooming in your face, mixed with very dark areas that you can't see. So this is both problems together in one image. Guys, something that's a little bit more comfortable is being able to see detail in dark areas, being able to see detail in bright areas, and bringing the two a little bit closer together. So here's a problem that I see with a lot of furry avatars. They'll just have black, 100% black, like zero albedo, zero specular. You cannot see anything. This is a real-world example of a material called Vantablack that completely absorbs light as soon as any light touches it. It is next to a bronze object that has more appropriate lighting. You can see from the black object, all the detail went away. I can't see any. There's a whole face in there, but I can't see any of it. Any of it. So, yeah, when you're making your characters, if you're going to have a very dark character, use albedo validation. Make sure you have enough brightness that we're able to see those dark crevices, and just give us something to work with. Don't just become the phantom blot. So this is an image of the actual phantom blot, which showed up in an episode of DuckTales, and hilariously shows the problem. You can barely make out any detail or his form against the very, very dark trees in the background. If it wasn't for those few kind of light-colored lines, he would completely disappear. And not every character that you make needs to be the phantom blot. Here's the next problem. By the way, if you have seizure warning, we're going to go full on saturated colors. Problem number 2 is fluorescence. So this is whenever you might see a few people who really love having green avatars, and they love the color green so much, so they go in the program and they say, all right, green 100%. Red 0%, blue 0%, maximum radiation. Green specifically is the color that's actually most sensitive to our eyes. So you could cut that in half, and you would see a little bit closer to the rest of the colors in your emission if you just reduce the prevalence of green. But anytime you have maximum saturation, here's what happens. You shine kind of like a burnt umber light, kind of like what we have in here, and it hits your green avatar. Well, that light is now green. Maybe it's a red light that's hitting your avatar. Yeah, no, there's no red at all in the model that can reflect back. It doesn't exist. Right? So you have blue. You have a blue light hitting a green avatar, and that also disappears. And then you have another light that's maybe like a little bit more of a grayish or like a whitish kind of light. That light will hit it and it becomes green immediately. There is absolutely no nuance to the lighting or the colors. We can't appreciate the light in the world. The wonderful lighting that the guys have made for us here in VRChat, your model will not be using it if you just have maximum saturation. So here's my recommendations. Albedo validation. There's a tool in a viewer in Unity that you can use to validate your albedo. Don't have anything whiter than 90%. Don't have anything darker than 0.015, and you can even go a little bit higher with the black, so you get a little bit more detail in there. And you need to take care with your saturation, so it's not 100% saturated. Have appropriate GI, fall off, ambient occlusion. Let me appreciate the detail in the model. Let me see detail in shadows. Don't just let the shadow go to black. Don't just let there be nothing there. Have an ambient occlusion map so that even in the shadow, when there's no light hitting your model, it's just a bounce light from the world, I can still see there's some shadowing in your neck, maybe some shadowing under your arms, shadowing between your fingers, or just something. If you're wearing clothes, maybe having some shadow behind the clothes could help, or inside your mouth. Minimize your emissive and flat materials so that we can actually take advantage of the lighting that we have in a well-lit world. But I will say, corollary to that, there's a lot of worlds that don't have very good lighting, in which case I have a feature where I can actually up the emission on my avatar, and I literally just plug the albedo into emission. So if it's too dark, I can just bring it up a little bit and control how much it needs to be, so that you can see detail even in areas that are completely black or devoid of light, which is not realistic at all. But it can help in situations where lighting is not very good. In post-process, you can minimize overexposed bloom. That'll be just a lot more pleasing on the eyes. A small amount of bloom over a very long trail looks a lot more natural, a lot more beautiful. And then certain color grading processes like HEX will bend strong light towards white to avoid oversaturation in areas that might otherwise just head to this radioactive green or radioactive red area. You definitely want to kind of bring the values a little closer together, bring the colors and the lighting a little bit closer together, and it will net you a very nice appearance. The entire Virtual Furry Museum passes Unity's albedo validation. I don't have the images to show you, but I made sure that every single piece of art does not go darker than the deepest black. Every single bright color does not go brighter than the brightest white. I have a special shader just to make sure that that happens for everybody. So here's an example of Barro Negro. This is a pottery of the night, very popular in Mexico's Day of the Dead. And I just wanted to show you guys, you can have a very dark object with tons of beautiful, gorgeous detail. Just don't make it completely black. Give us a little bit of light, a little bit of shading, a little bit of color to work with it. And for something this dark, maybe have a little bit more reflections. Maybe it's a smoother surface and you have a light somewhere. We can just something to look at other than a blob. And if you think that it can't be done in games, well, here's your answer for that. Super Mario 3D World's Bowser's Fury was very, very popular when it first came out. And they did quite a lot of interesting things here to show you detail across the model while still looking like it's dark. They actually have contrast in the head and the brighter areas of the character. So you have very, very bright, strong light, which ends up making the rest of the character look dark by comparison. There's plenty of detail in the scales. The scales are a little darker than the areas up top. And all of this wonderful detail can be had on a console that is far less technically superior than what we have for PCs. The same things they're doing in here, you can do on Quest. So that brings us to our next chapter, design. Design is such a huge topic. I wanted to spend a lot more time covering it, but I'm already like 25 minutes left in the presentation. I just don't have the time to go over everything in as much detail as I would hope to. But if there's only one slide that you take anything from this presentation, I think this is the slide that I want everyone to see and understand. Contrast. When you have two colors very close together, well, two of equal value, they're going to blend in and mix in each other. You're not going to see any difference or any variation. The more you separate those colors apart, those values apart, the easier it is to tell which form is which and what it's doing. So make sure if you have like a very dark tie on top of a very dark shirt, I'm not going to be able to see those things very clearly unless maybe I'm a lot closer to them. Separating the values a little bit more will mean I'll be able to see it. And this is the same concept that applies to color. The more different a color is, the stronger you'll be able to make out the shapes. But even when colors are different, you end up with colors of a different hue that end up having the same value, and they look very strange, like the blue and the green on the very right. It's kind of weird to tell what that form is, because even though the colors are slightly different, they have the same, they end up coming to the same luminance values as far as we can perceive them. I wish I had the CIE chromaticity diagram to show you, but humans are a lot more sensitive to the color green than to other colors. So a little bit of green is going to go a very long way in terms of the brightness. What's really good is to try and separate not just the color, but the values as well. And here's a good example of that. This is an image from Harry Potter and Sorcerer's Stone 2001, directed by Chris Columbus. The entire scene is pretty dark, with the exception of a single lantern. But not only is the lantern bright, it's also warm, much warmer color than the blue background. This allows us to make it out very clearly and very easily in the scene. Highly, highly recommend if you're going to have or set up your scenes like this, the highest point of contrast is going to be the thing that people see the most. And we are much more sensitive to value changes in black and white than we are to changes in color. But you can use both to your advantage. I wanted to include just a little bit about balance and composition, but we don't have time to go too heavily detailed into this. Actually, I don't think we have any time to go into detail into this, but long story short, you don't have to keep everything straight head on. Some people have said the rule of thirds, but the reality is there's a certain weight to anything that you put in a piece. You don't have to follow the rule of thirds exactly. Just make sure that you have the balance right so that it appears well. If you have a big, large, empty space, that is a free and open space for your mind to wander. That space needs to be cut in by something. We have like a character who's, I guess, is climbing up the pyramid. Our eye really wants to go to that because all the lines are leading to it. There's too much to talk about balance and composition here, so I'm going to move on, but I highly recommend looking into it if you're a 2D artist and you're coordinating things. So this is an image by Panda Paco, before anyone asks. Yes, I did ask him if I can use his image, and he was very honored. It's called Egg. He made this January 23rd, 2023. After he joined the museum, I noticed a lot of improvement in his artwork and a lot more focus on lighting and shading after we communicated. But there's just so much to talk about design in this. I'll try to keep it very, very brief. If we go ahead and blur it, and we look at the difference between the grayscale, the colored that are being blurred, you'll notice certain lines and forms start appearing. And they're all kind of radiating out from the egg. The egg shows up in the foreground, and it's a different color than everything else in the picture, which gives a lot more clarity to it. The very dark purple arm going against the, which is a complementary color, the golden yellow of the egg, makes it stand out very clearly. And then the shading from the very brightest part down to the darkest really helps us. It kind of frames it and nestles it and cradles it in the position of the arms. I wish I had more time to talk about it, but we have a schedule. So chapter 3 is rhetoric. So we have a scene which is well lit, which we understand the coloring, lighting, and shading. But what about over time? How do we change that? I had someone come up to me at it was actually it was at Silas's remembrance ceremony. A lot of people bring me stuff all the time because I'm the museum curator. And he showed me a comic with tons and tons of different panels of it's kind of like a World War II or Vietnam War dogfight thing. And every single sky looked like the sky on the top left. It was blue with white clouds. It didn't matter what the scene was. It went on for 20, 30, 40, 50 pages. I couldn't find another sky color. The truth is, the reality is, no two skies are the same anywhere on Earth in any physical conditions on Earth. The weather changes all the time. A lot of days I'll go outside. I live in Florida, and we have beautiful sunsets. And the colors of those sunsets will change from one day to the next. The moisture in the atmosphere will change. The atmosphere itself will physically change. The clouds passing over the sun will change. All of that stuff contributes to the lighting and the coloring in the scene. But because of that, you don't have to be 100% realistic, you know? You can control the lighting and the colors to what you need for that shot, to what you need for that scene. What kind of emotion are you trying to get across? Maybe it starts off as a bright, beautiful, sunny, colorful day. Then when the battle's happening, it's a lot darker, or maybe it's becoming more cloudy. When or maybe there's like lightning flashes or something. It's a little more extreme. But then someone has died. Now it's overcast and it's gloomy, and it's a little bit softer in the lighting. You can change it over time, and you absolutely should. This is what professionals do for big budget Hollywood movies. This is The Wizard of Oz. I'm sure you've heard of it. The movie starts out in sepia tone, and spoiler alert, it becomes colorful. She walks along the yellow when she first appears in the wonderful land of Oz. She is confronted and assaulted by the color almost, and then she's walking along the yellow brick road, and that road, man, is so bright and it's so yellow and it's so beautiful against the dark green and the lush backgrounds. Then she heads into Emerald City, and it's all green now. There's some kind of darker parts that change the color in the scenes, and then it all comes back. It kind of like bookends to sepia tone. Similar colors in the scene will recall similar memories and similar emotions and feelings. So if I have a very dark moment in the movie, I can physically make it darker. I can make it different from everything else in the movie. Any change that you make is going to be memorable. And the greater that changes, the greater the memory will be, the greater it will last. And then you can always, later on, call back to those same colors, call back to similar memories. Here's a color script for Finding Nemo. This is directed by Andrew Stanton, and you can find this color script in the book. I'll give you the name of the book later. But this is the very start, the very opening of the movie. And I really want to point to these two here. If you haven't seen the movie, he goes with his wife to check on the eggs, but then they get attacked and all the eggs get eaten. This is the before and after, the very same sea anemone that once had some light and happy colors is now quite dark and dreary. So yeah, you can definitely use a change in the scene and the colors to express different emotions. Now this project is actually one I made for Moat Marine. This is the Manatee quiz game. It starts off, it's very bright, it's very colorful, and then as you go along and progress more and more further into the quiz, the colors actually start to get warmer. We start to introduce more red and pink through the magenta, through the jellyfish. Then you're underneath the bridge and it's a lot darker, but it's everything just turns a sickly green color. And then finally it's this very warm golden kind of trail down the canal before heading up to a very cold dark blue area for the final question. But then when you defeat the quiz, you kind of have a nice screen clear of any warm, bright colors. Everything is nice and blue, and the grass is lush and green. which is kind of recalling what we saw at the very beginning of the quiz. Making those changes throughout the project, you can have something that isn't time-based, but maybe it's a VRChat world. Just have different rooms with different colored themes. It can really instruct people on what they're supposed to feel at any given moment. You can have a nice cozy room that's maybe a lot warmer. Maybe it's free of the blue light that's going to bother your eyes or keep you awake. Maybe there's a kitchen that's going to have a lot bluer light. It's going to be a lot more of a working space, right? Maybe you have some sunlight peering in from the outdoors to study, so it's warm, but it's bright. It's not cozy. It's kind of a mix between the working and cozy environment. You can change your light throughout the scene in order to invoke different emotions for different reasons. This is not just something that you do in art, but interior design as well. So we're going to end it with Chapter 4, Unity and Harmony, bringing it all together. And I was asked when I first made this panel if I would cover Silas's memorial, so I did. I am. The question that I asked was, how should I honor our fandom's creator when he passed earlier this year? He was my best friend for the last year of his life, and I was his. So it did impact me very emotionally. And he meant a lot to a lot of people, and in the fandom, I knew I had to do a very good job, and it had to be like nothing else I had ever done before, and it had to look like nothing else in the museum. When you start off in a very dark hallway with some bright lights up ahead. It's just leading you down the center, and there's not too much to really look at or see. It's just kind of empty. You head down the stairs, there's some caution lights and just some lights to guide you. But other than that, you don't really know where you're going. Then you enter this very large hallway. And at the end of the hallway is just all these wonderful colors from the Rainbow Bridge that you slowly walk towards and slowly comes into view until you're hit by it. One of the most magnificent scenes in VRChat, or so what I've been told from many people who've been in the world. With filled with tons of lights and colors. Your eye will be drawn toward the top, a very, very large fan, with the shadows cascading down the sides. And I don't have video of this because I want you to go into the world and see it for yourself. But all the lights flash and flicker. And there's actually a real-time reflection probe, but don't worry, it runs well. I have a plaque dedicated to Silas, which is very bright. And the reflection is very bright coming in your eyes. I have that as something I do in the museum. You can walk over to the left on the scroll, you can actually see people's stories. It starts with Rod, the man who was Silas's partner of over 40 years. And then you can read through many other stories, including Ash Coyotes, some people in VRChat like Stray, and many others. And then you can also read various stones, various plaques. There's 4 of them, kind of detailing not so much the things that he did, but the person that he was. Because there's already a space in the museum dedicated to what he had done. I wanted people who didn't know him to know just how beautiful a man he truly was, to get to know and to learn and what he stood for and what he wanted. Yeah, this is right now in the Virtual Furry Museum. You can go there anytime and head downstairs and enter this room. I had to ask myself a lot of different questions and try to figure out what is this room supposed to look like. So when I ask the questions, I kind of answer it like with the direction I want to go in. I want it to be heavenly, breathtaking. I want it to be larger than life. So the way that I resolved that, I would have thousands of martens lining up in the room like they're statues, each of them holding an orb. and all the orbs changing colors to represent all the different people within the furry fandom and all the different colors that represent us and who we are. And then Silas himself would have all the colors represented in him, and he would hold kind of an orb of his own, which didn't contain just one color, but all of them. So how do I show the history? Well, he is kind of the very first furry, right? He was one of the OGs who helped put all this together and co-directed the very first fandom and co-founded the very first anime fan club. He was responsible for bringing us all together. So the history would be more ancient. It would be these solid inscriptions written in stone. And my inspiration for that was the Rosetta Stone. I show his impact on others with the big, massive scroll. People can go up and they can just read story after story about different people that he influenced and influenced him. And Silas himself would be joyful because that's the kind of person that he was. A lot of people thought my inspiration for the room was Cerebro from X-Men. But unfortunately, I've never seen or read X-Men. I'm sorry, that's not the inspiration. The primary inspiration for the room was the Southern Air Temple in Avatar: The Last Airbender. This is where Avatar Aang, Sokka, and Katara go in, and he realizes he's connected to all these people of the past. And there's a statue for every single one of them. I really loved the visual of that, and I loved how it showed how many different people he connected and how he meant so much to so many people. The Rainbow Bridge was a poem by Edna Clinton Reiki about a bridge connecting us to heaven to meet our pets who have fallen into the afterlife. And then the stones are based off the Rosetta Stone, which actually has the same inscription in ancient Greek and Egyptian hieroglyphs, and I think Sumerian. That was how we were able to communicate with the people of the past through what was written on the stones. The lighting in the room itself has been praised. I've had people come and tell me, I've had someone say their entire life is dedicated to VRChat and showing different worlds in VRChat, and that's how they make their living, by streaming different worlds. And they said they had never been in a more beautiful place than this room. I highly recommend you all go there. If I wanted to talk about I feel like talking about the lighting now is just going to circle the conversation back, but the long story, the gist of it is the whole room has one color, but we all have our own color to contribute. So moving on, there are some broad concepts, and this is the slides that I was these are the secrets, right? The secret sauce to who I am and what I do and how it happens and how it looks that way. I was kind of nervous to share this with you because it's this is the heart and the soul of the artist. I live in Florida. I love the ocean. It's an image that you can stare at forever. And I always keep wondering, how do I get an image that you can stare at forever? You have long, very uninterrupted textures and patterns with no discernible tiling. Sometimes it morphs over time and there's no discernible repeats. It doesn't look like a virtual anything. It doesn't look digital. It looks it's just indescribable to tell how often it repeats. And so I look for different ways I can kind of incorporate the ocean into the project. For the dark room, every single tile is tilted in a different location, and it's reflecting over the floor, and it gives you kind of that shimmering ocean feel. I've even had people say the bottom floor of the museum, it feels like they're walking on water. Same thing for the Rainbow Bridge. But it's not just limited to that. I use it for all sorts of different things. So if you look at my work, you'll see that the ocean plays a huge part. Another broad concept is nostalgic verisimilitude. So I like, with the museum, taking people back to those memories they had when they were a kid. What kind of experiences did those kids have at the time? And can I replicate that? Can I bring them back to that moment? without having to exactly replicate it piece by piece. So something I remember very fondly is Target and Walmart. They had all the games in a display case, and you were able to hold a controller and like break your neck to try and see the TV. So I actually replicated that for the 90s mascot platformers. And I also have that for the Fun Day Paw Pet Show exhibit, which is coming up. It's not released publicly yet, but I'm kind of mimicking it there. I mimic surfaces that people are most likely to have seen before and feel before, so that when you see it, you know what it is. I know it's weird for me to talk about this when I just showed you a world where nothing is anything you've ever seen before, but the museum is full of. It gives you the sense that you are in a real museum. If you've ever been to a museum, you know the structure, you know these surfaces, what they feel like. You know that it's a very clean, well kept space, well lit space, and people immediately understand what that means. You need a very strict adherence to physically based rendering to make this work, but what it accomplishes is a lot of people really can connect with their childhood, and it just brings them back to a better time, I think. And then the last concept I'll describe, painful light. So whenever there's a hard subject that I need to talk about in the museum, I pair it with a bright light shining in your face. It's physically painful to be in there and to see that, but that's kind of the point, right? So I have over there the Furry Family Ofrenda exhibit, which is, again, it's going to be coming in soon. It's not ready yet. But I have bright lights shining into you, and just an example being used not by me but by someone else. The incinerator, the very infamous incinerator scene from Toy Story 3. I try to keep the world as lovely and nice as possible so that people coming in can have a good time and experience it well. But you don't want to make a hard subject look easy. You definitely want, if you have a harder subject to cover, you want it to feel that way. And this is just one example of something that I do to communicate that. All right, and that kind of brings us to the end of the presentation. I'm just going to show some recommendations now for books and directors and art, things to look at if you are interested in looking further in lighting. I don't have any furries up here, but there are some plenty of furry artists that I would love to give a shout out to. I'll say Panda Paco for letting me use his image. Wonderful bean. Take a look at his work. Multiyashka Sweet also does some very fine work with very slice of life things, and his color rendering is phenomenal. But here's the book, The Art of Pixar, the complete color scripts and select art from 25 years of animation. Very long title, but very wonderful resource. These are the actual color scripts that Pixar made for their films, kind of like a storyboard, but just with color. So they know how the color changes from scene to scene, moment to moment. Something that you can definitely look at for a good resource, research, and learning. And just get into that mindset, especially if you're making a comic book or a movie. As far as directors go, Andrew Stanton. He loves round form, so he loves showing every single aspect that I showed you in that shading breakdown, the specular highlights, the diffuse shading, the rim lighting, bounce lighting, GI. It's so very painfully obvious in all of his films that that's what he is trying to do and show you. So definitely look at his work for lighting. Absolutely wonderful and phenomenal director. And then going kind of the other way, Andrew Wes Anderson. His stuff is very flat usually, but he kind of calls back to Norman Rockwell paintings, and because there's not so much light and shadow going around the surface, but more just colors flattened in design, it gives you that appearance, that effect. Here's film director, interior designer Joseph Kosinski, who actually designed and lit the sets for Tron Legacy. and a lot of his works just showcase light in very interesting ways. Caravaggio, one of my favorite artists of all time, a wonderful fine artist and illustrator after the Renaissance. Very, very dramatic artist too. Very, very wonderful detail and very, very extreme use of lighting. You can definitely learn a lot from him if you're more inclined to that direction. Of course, Norman Rockwell for more the Wes Anderson style of lighting. And then, of course, there's James Turrell, the 3D artist who I called back to in the beginning of the presentation. One of the most phenomenal lighting artists I've ever seen. There's so much that you can do with light, and it just takes some experimenting, some time, and just a little bit of know-how and a little bit of willpower to do it. With that being said, I am now open for questions, and I would like to open the questions for anyone here in this room with me. And then I'll take questions from Furality's Q&A on Discord. If you have a question, go on Discord, ask it. Any questions? Any questions at all? Are there? There are no questions. Okay. Well, if there aren't, oh, well, I see Lorry coming up here with a question for me.
Hello, hi. Yeah, we have some questions in the Q&A that I can read off of. One that I see here. So from Archimedes, for shading with colors instead of black and white, how do you best choose the color to shade with or realize what not to use?
Oh, that's a very excellent question. So, generally speaking, you're going to want to have a certain color scheme in mind. So if your entire character is going to be very close to one color, you're going to want to look at that color wheel that I had and kind of try to pick colors that are closer in that range. If you're going to have an accent color, you're going to want a color that's maybe opposite of it. Or if you have a couple accent colors, maybe it's more of a triad. So you just pick colors that can be seen clearly with each other. And then for the majority of your character, maybe it's a very specific color. Like I'm green all the way around, and then my hands are kind of like a little bit of a lighter yellow, but like yellowish green. And then if I do wear shirts or clothing, the clothes are going to be a completely different color from that. The most important thing is that contrast and the constancy to be able to see it. So a body should probably read more as a body, and then clothes should read more as clothes sitting on top of the body. What you don't want is you don't want the clothes, the body, the hair, the teeth, and everything to all be very similar to the same color. Try to be a little more organized.
All right. Let me see if there's another one here. From Tukuri. For Unity World, this is a question regarding Unity World creation. When baking lights, even in bakery, on a high detailed world, there can be a lot of rainbow compression artifacts on the light map shadows. Is there a way to not crunch, compress light maps while keeping the world file size low?
Yes. RGB 985, that's the format you want. That is kind of an uncompressed format, but it's 4 times more memory to do that. So if you're going to do that, just be very, very cautious and very wary. Something I use it for the museum because there's a lot of white walls and the colors don't look very good over that. If you have a little more detail in the wall, it can break it up. But if you're going to use RGB 985, you're going to have to lower the light map resolution a little bit, or you're just going to have to take the hit that it's going to take a little bit more memory to run it. And something that I do to lower the resolution a little bit and make it look beautiful is bicubic light maps. So the shader will have bicubic interpolation over the light map. You have smaller resolutions and it looks beautiful. Nice and smooth and nice and clean with no artifacts.
All right. We have time for one more question?
Absolutely, yes.
One other question from Cypress. What's a good way to practice lighting practically without committing to finalizing an entire finished work?
Do it. I think that's like I don't really know what else to say about that. If you want good lighting, you just have to do it. You have to try it for yourself. You need to see your program and what it does. You need to see your models and what it does. There's some generally good tips to go off of, but until you actually put a light in there and then hit bake, you're not going to know what it looks like. And every scene is going to be different. You can change the color of the sky just slightly, and it'll change all the colors in your world. So you just have to do it, and it does take time. But that's what's great about bakery. You can hit bake, and then it renders, and in a few minutes you have lighting done. And if something needs to be fixed, you can go and fix it. Yeah, as far as if you're working digitally, then a very cool thing to do is just HSL adjustments over like a lighting layer. And that way you can have your lighting done, and then you can just kind of tweak the colors a little bit in the lighting on a separate layer so that you're not manipulating the core of what you're making on. Yeah.
All right. All right, yeah, so any other final comments that you have?
So yeah, I highly recommend going into the Virtual Furry Museum. There's a lot of interesting stuff about lighting in there. You'll be able to see like good lighting in practice. But if you're a creator, and that's what's really most important here, I want this to be good for creators. You need to do it and think more practically about lighting. You need to really take care and attention to what you're doing. And what can I say? Yeah, I guess the Nike slogan is the best one for this. Just do it. If you want to get better at lighting, there's nothing better than just doing it for yourself and then seeing what works, what doesn't, and then seeing what you can do to fix it. It really does take time and experience to do it well. A lot of people think there's a button or a checkbox I can give them that immediately turns them into a better artist. And to that I say, if I gave you one of the world's greatest pencils, can you draw me a Rembrandt? It takes experience, it takes dedication, and without doing it, there's only so much that you can learn. So yeah, highly recommend people just do it. Is there one more question? I think we might have time for one more question.
I know we're wrapping. We got to wrap it up. So
thank you so much.
Yeah, if you want, you can always go into the Q&A and answer questions yourself. But
yeah, I'll see if I can pop in there and answer some of you guys' questions. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.